Podcasters Roundtable round. Nope, let's start that again. Hit record button. The live audience, hit record. Caught it this time before we got 5 minutes down the road. Podcasters Roundtable, round 71. Roundtabler's Choice. That's what I'm going to call it because, well, if you've been following along in the last previous few roundtables, I am reaching into the depths of the Podcasters Roundtable sign-up list. That's at podcastersroundtable.com/guest, where you can sign up. And when you sign up, you get a chance to submit topics of things you might want to talk about. And so since I'm just going back, I'm pulling people randomly from that list, getting whoever's on it the longest and whoever's available. The topics are sort of, it's going to be a little different. So, you know, I always love to try new things here on the roundtable. So last second thought, I said, hey, let's go from the list that the new roundtablers had submitted. And it was a long time ago, so we'll give them a break if they're not sure what that is. But I have it here on my phone. And we will see what comes up. Because I know both of these guys can talk about podcasting off the cuff, pretty much any topic we approach. So let's meet the roundtable. Starting off, first up, way down here, over here, co-host Daniel J. Lewis. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. I am Daniel J. Lewis. I always love talking about podcasting, love being on Podcasters Roundtable. Make sure you watch us live every other week, podcastersroundtable.com.
That's right, fortnightly, as I think it says in the description. It probably doesn't say that. I finally learned what that meant, so...
It's an Australian thing, right?
Yeah, but it's so funny because the first time I remember hearing that was it's a Peanuts special. Charlie Brown, they go to like France or something, and they talk about a fortnight. I was always confused. Now we got it. No problem. Dave Jackson, co-host, welcome back.
Hey, buddy. Glad to be here. And you did. I'm glad you said Charlie Brown because I wasn't sure what you said there for a second. I was like, what? You think repeat what? So. But yeah, looking forward to talking a little podcasting tonight.
Always. Your wall of fame is growing back there.
It's getting there. And I got about 6 more I got to print. So the advice on that is get a level first, though, because if you actually looked at the wall, I have to like sit like this to make it look normal.
Right on. And so, that is awesome. Those are your listeners, right?
Those are actual listeners. Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Next up, new roundtabler George. Welcome to the roundtable. You're first.
You said check out. You said Wall of Fame. I have a little Wall of Fame. I host my own show that used to be out of this space right here, but it's too dang noisy and too dang hot, and now I do it out of another location. You'll hear noises throughout the show. But anyway, I'm George Whittam. I work with the voiceover world mostly, but I also host a show of myself called the Voiceover Body Shop, or cutely VOBS.TV. And that's a Monday Night Live show. So I'm used to doing this stuff live. It's my favorite. End the show, save, upload. That's the best thing ever for the lazy/busy. But yeah, I have my little Wall of Fame. I get to host some pretty cool people on the show from time to time, like Tara Strong, who's known in the brony pony world, if you know what that means. And then I've had... Tom Kenny on, who's SpongeBob. He's actually been in my little house here, my little studio. So we've had some cool guests over the years. So anyway, that's me. That's what I do.
Very cool. And in classic, perfect podcast tradition, I hit live. They're sawing bricks outside of my window.
Oh, good. Right? That's you.
Do you hear that?
That's you, not me. Thank God.
Dude, this start a live show, start a recording, and they will start sawing outside your window.
Guaranteed.
All day. They've been out there all day long. It is almost 5 o'clock. That is classic.
Kind of a testament to the ATR, right? Because it doesn't sound like I can hear it, but just a little bit, right? Like these mics are so good at not picking up that tertiary noise, you know? It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm pointing the rejection. They're trying to get as much rejection towards the window as possible.
It's there, but it sounds like loud running water.
Oh, my goodness. Oh. All right. Hey, well, speaking of, that's Ian. Welcome. You are new roundtabler, first time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Ray, thank you for inviting me. Should I do an introduction? Is that what we're doing? So I have a podcast called Love Affair Travel, and it's all about people who do adventures and live lifestyles of long-term travel. I interview people that like do really crazy adventures, like the guy who traveled to every country in the world without flying. But then also I like to talk about business because I think that freedom is the capacity to make money and afford traveling is what makes it so it's possible to do that, you know? So it's a little bit of business and a lot of travel. And then
Very
I
cool.
also have the Freedom Podcasting Company. So for the last, I think 4 or 5 years now, 5 years I'm told, we've been producing podcasts for people, and we've got a team of people that produce them, so people can just Dropbox us audio, and then we turn it into finished podcasts with blog posts and everything.
Yeah, very cool. And Freedom, maybe a little shout out to your own life. It's like a lifestyle business, right? I mean, you can go anywhere you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lifestyle business. I think carries like a lot of baggage, right? Because people
Really?
think that it's
I
not
kind of
serious.
like that term. Oh, yeah, I guess.
It's a technology thing, right? Because when you talk to startups, I was talking to one of my friends who's trying to disrupt the healthcare industry with a new, software, and that's a really valiant thing. And then a lot of the lifestyle design kind of clashes with the way that a lot of the technology kind of startup guys think about things. So, but yeah, I mean, it is lifestyle.
Cool. Trying to prevent as much of that talk. This is crazy. Drive me insane, man. all
Oh,
day
I can
long.
only
All right.
imagine how loud it is on your end.
On this show, Podcast Roundtable, discussing the issues that podcasters face daily.
Every day.
Daily. How do you deal with noise outside? In this case, the ATR-21, the aforementioned, has an on-off switch, so I will be employing this switch when I'm not talking. Man, it just seems to be getting louder. So, all right, hey, let's pass this along. I can't not bring this up. We'll make this the first topic. When I was looking at Ian's website, there's our own Daniel J. Lewis quoted right there, right on the website.
Oh no.
And it's all about new and noteworthy. So we can't escape it, can we, Dave?
No, I have a bucket with me, so I'm good. I get the feeling I'm going to throw up a lot in my mouth right now. So
It's a long running, and it's nothing personal. It's a kind of an ongoing joke that about new and noteworthy. And,
well, I'm open to learn. I'm like, oh, cool. This is the
Yeah.
other side of the fence. Maybe there's something I can learn here. So
Hey, so
Yeah.
Ian, why don't you really brief? Tell us if you know. Do you recall what that post was about?
It's all about how the new and noteworthy is something we shoot for, and I mean, you can't promise that you're going to get there, but it's really important. That's my thing. Is getting there is really valuable, and we see statistics drop off when people stop getting listed there, and it happened 8 weeks for one of our clients recently. Like 8 weeks in, all of a sudden they're not in the new and noteworthy anymore, and you're on the top. I mean, when you go to the iTunes and the first thing you click, the new and noteworthy section is like the section right under the biggest banners, right? So to me, it's like a super important thing to hit when you're launching a show.
I think that we would disagree about its importance, but I
Well,
think
that's my
it's an
question.
important distinction to make here. We're missing a distinction that's very important. Do you know what it is? It's a game
No,
show.
what is it?
Do. I'm
new and
waiting for the-
noteworthy. Is it new and noteworthy in a category, Alex?
Yeah, Dave for 200 or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry I didn't phrase that in a question.
Well, there's
Elaborate, Dave. Elaborate for the
Well,
uninitiated.
there's new and noteworthy, which you basically need a pulse, and that is questionable because I've seen dead podcasts in there. And then there are category new and noteworthy, and I believe which one has numbers? One actually has numbers and one does not.
None of them. None
None
of
of
the
them.
new and noteworthies have numbers. It's the category rankings that have numbers.
Ah, okay. So what I've always been wanting to hear, and Ian, man, you can elaborate on this. I don't think I've ever said it doesn't give you a bump. The problem is, and why I've always been like, is people literally think it's going to give them thousands of downloads, and I haven't seen that in a very, very long time. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying, without Twitter bombing and fake reviews, just good old-fashioned good content.
But even if it gives you a bump of 1,000, so what when those 1,000 people, it's not
Leave.
1,000 people that they just leave. Yeah, you get a bump, and then you see it on every show. If you go to the stats, it levels off. But I'm not, I'm all for, what's the value of the one or two people that got introduced to you? Those one or two people could be your biggest, right? Your biggest
Right.
promoters of your show. So it's important, but there's a big difference between getting in a new noteworthy in a category, which just sort of is lost on iTunes, and the front page, which is 100% hand curated. You cannot get yourself in new and noteworthy on the front page by anything that you're going to do other than maybe becoming, you have to get on the radar of someone at Apple. Is that right, Daniel?
Yeah, you have to be noteworthy. You can't simply be new to be on the front page. Apple does pick those. Now, yeah, there are things you can do to kind of get their attention, that they see you promoting your listing in iTunes a lot, that they see that you're getting a lot of downloads, a lot of subscriptions, not just simply views to your page. And they look at all of that, and a couple people probably try and figure out, well, which of these podcasts seem noteworthy enough for us to feature on the front page of iTunes.
And so the major, but Ian, you had a spin on this. So I think the quote, you quoted Daniel about, I don't know if anyone has that pulled up, and then you go on to say that it wasn't necessarily like a rip of Daniel. It was to say that you thought maybe the emphasis or the focus or the wording should have been a little different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that, for me, it's like, we try to make shows that are really great, and we want to be able to hit the new and noteworthy. And so getting into that section, you're kind of shaping the thing to be something that iTunes would like look at and want. So to me, it was just kind of like, because I tell people a lot that, you know, getting into new and noteworthy is important. When I read Daniel's post, I was like, you know, if somebody reads this, they're going to think that I'm like lying to them about this. You know what I mean?
Why is it important? That's the question.
That is the question.
Just because getting to the top of the front of the iTunes page.
Okay, let me give you this example. Okay, somebody hands me a trophy, and they go, "Congratulations, Dave! You're the best podcaster in the."
Dave, I'll hold up my trophy for you.
Thank you very much. Dave, but that actually means something. This one does not. You are the top podcaster in the Hunter Lakes Apartments allotment, and I bought this for $20. Does it mean anything? No. So that's the whole thing. If you said, "Oh, when I'm number one in new and noteworthy, I got X amount of downloads that stayed," okay, so that's the whole thing. What does it mean to be at the top? Why is that important? Besides on a media kit to say I'm number one in new and noteworthy.
I mean, yeah, media kit's really important too. Like, I don't understand how anybody could think that it's not important. Like,
but why is it important?
Can I chime in? Maybe it's because maybe it's if you're trying to garner sponsors.
Okay, what if you're not sponsored? Why is it important?
If you're not sponsored, okay.
Well, if you're looking for sponsors, you can show them a picture of you at the top of the list.
You could Photoshop that.
Yeah, you could.
But if you're, I know there is an answer, but I want you guys to bring it out. Why is it important? If you're not going after sponsors, why is it important?
You get more downloads. You're at the top of the list, so you can show people. I mean, that's the whole goal of like doing a podcast, right? To gain audience.
No, the right audience. The right audience.
To connect with my audience.
If you're connected with an advertiser that only cares about clicks and is actually not engaged with the product and doesn't really is not really going to be successful in the long term, but they want a viral something right now, they want attention right now, fine. But if you know, you're not going to get that.
I can go buy plays on SoundCloud.
Yeah, you can buy. We can get you downloads if that's all that's important. But will those downloads actually convert to anything 5 months from now, a year from now, other than a sponsor who leaves after they've saw you got 1,000 downloads and no one buys their product because guess what? No one listening has anything to do with their spammy product that they just went to your podcast, bought a space, maybe don't even know what your show's about. They're just like, oh, you get 100,000 downloads. I can't sell it in my pocket. Why isn't your audience buying Oreo cookies? Because they're vegans or so, you know what I mean? Like, it just makes no sense. Like, pay attention. Like, it does matter who you're reaching. This is fun. We don't ever get this. This is what I was looking for. So
yeah, I mean, it's so baffling to me that you guys don't understand what I'm saying.
Well, no, I understand what you're saying. We do understand. Here's what I've been trying to take a step back from looking at new and noteworthy and the space, and I realized that I think some of us, myself included, have been so surrounded by overhype that it's pushed us almost too far the opposite direction.
Yes.
And I'm doing some research right now for an upcoming episode of the Audacity to Podcast to talk about who is helped by new and noteworthy. Here's what I think is that, okay, it is undeniable that being in new and noteworthy means you'll get more people clicking to your podcast. That's undeniable. Now, more than zero. So it's anything more than zero. Yes, you'll get more people clicking on your podcast. So who benefits from those clicks? I think people who already have a lot of momentum behind them, or celebrities, or highly mass appeal topics will be will have more to gain from being featured in new and noteworthy, because there's that mass appeal, or someone recognizes, oh, so-and-so. Like the other day, I was or actually a couple weeks ago when I started this research, I looked at New and Noteworthy, and I saw, oh, Vimeo has a podcast. And out of the other however many podcasts are listed on the front page of iTunes, I don't remember any of them. All I remember is Vimeo had a podcast. Why did I remember that? Not because of their cover art, not because of anything else, but because I know about Vimeo. So it struck me that, oh, Vimeo has a podcast. So if I saw in there, oh, Harrison Ford has a podcast, or this person I know of has a podcast, I would click on it and check it out because there's that celebrity status, or maybe there's a lot of momentum, a lot of marketing going into this, so it's much easier for people when they remember, yeah, I heard about this podcast I need to check out. I'll go to iTunes and, oh, hey, there it is. It's right there on the front page, Serial or anything by Gimlet, kind of in that vein. On the flip side, though, for the independent podcasters, yes, we do get more clicks, more subscriptions through it. Pretty much ignore what happens during the time that you're featured. You need to really think about what happens afterward. And yes, there is some staying power. That could be as low as a few dozen people. It could be as high as a couple thousand. That's where it really depends on the content, the presentation of it, and such. But what I really think we do still do wrongly often in the podcasting space is focus too much on that one thing, when if we put that much effort into reaching our actual target audience instead of basically trying to get ourselves up on a billboard somewhere, if we focused on reaching the actual target audience, I think we could do a lot better than New and Noteworthy.
I think it has a lot to do with your topic, right? Like, and what kind of a reach it is, how wide mass appeal it is. I know my topic is extremely niche, right? So it would have almost no value at all for my audience, for my world.
But then if you spent the same amount of time and attention to get your podcast to build relationships with people who lead communities relevant to your topic, or to advertise in those communities, or to build a reputation in those communities, if you spent the same amount of time doing that as you would trying to get into New and Noteworthy, I think you'd benefit much more from your other effort.
And the thing is that there's clearly value in it, but going too far. The people who think they failed because they didn't hit New and Noteworthy is ridiculous. People burn their shows to the ground just to start them up again so they can be in New and Noteworthy.
That's what drives me nuts. When I see somebody go, well, I've only got 200 downloads an episode, I'm going to change the name and relaunch it so I can get higher and New and Noteworthy. That's when I see somebody spending $50 to make 50 cents. And I'm like, because in the end, even Ian said, when you come out of New and Noteworthy, you're going to lose some of that. Now, granted, the higher you get New and Noteworthy, I'm assuming it's not going to go back down to zero. So I get the idea. The other thing that you can do by getting somebody to the top of New and Noteworthy, you can prove that if you're a person that says, if you charge people to get them to the top of New and Noteworthy, you can now say, see, I delivered value.
It's a fun conversation. I think we could probably go the whole hour. So we probably should move off of it, but you can see it charges up the roundtable here.
Well, I think that it's important because like I launch podcasts all the time at Freedom Podcasting, right? Like we launch sometimes we do like 2 a month, right? And they're usually like we did Indiegogo podcast, and we did like we do podcasts for people that have existing audiences that are really large. And so for us, when we say we're launching it, it's more like, you're preparing, like you're going to submit that feed to iTunes, and like the launch is essentially just being really well prepared when you submit your feed to iTunes, and then 2 days later they email their list of 30,000 people, and then they get there. And so for us, it's like, I mean, to me, it's so obvious that that's a good idea.
Yeah,
and it doesn't
it's part of
cost
the
us
launch
anything.
strategy. The problem is when people put too much weight on that one part of the strategy, right? And think they failed because they didn't check off that box. Right. That's where it becomes a problem.
Yeah, don't think that the bowl of cereal in the commercial is part of the most important part of the nutritious breakfast.
It's the
even if it is great.
Here's my quotation on this, and I'm going to send this out right now on my Twitter account at the Ramen Noodle in case anyone wants to retweet this. But this is going to be my last thing I'll say here on New and Noteworthy. And this is, I worked hard on this, so I feel like this is a good quotation from me. Success doesn't come from being featured. Being featured comes from success.
There you go.
Okay.
Tweet that out.
I'll give you that. All right, moving on. Come on
Nice
now.
way to keep it rolling. All right,
I
so
love
let's
that
get into.
conversation too. Thank you for bringing it up. I think
It's
Yeah,
so
that's
much
good.
fun. Thank you
I
for
want to
giving
talk
us
to Ian more.
something
I'm like, all right,
controversial. I know.
Ian's coming on my
Yeah,
show.
no, I mean this is a controversial thing, and we can either agree to disagree and move on to another thing, or we can keep
No.
like. Because
No, I think that
yeah.
because I can see in an hour where we end up in the same place, but
Yeah.
I think that we could hammer it. Would just we shouldn't do the whole hour on it.
It almost
so.
becomes no, pink is the right color, no, purple's the right color, because
Right,
neither
right,
is
right.
wrong, and they're both specific to a particular thing.
Yeah, and
I
I both
can
I
totally
see
get that.
I see both points and valid points in both of them, and could drill down, but
Yeah.
just in the sake
and
of
I do have one technical thing that might help the listeners. Is that we were talking about categories, and the main category doesn't the number one page, but when you break it down into categories, there's all new and noteworthy sections in there, and then there's main sections for each one, like personal journals, health and lifestyle, business, blah blah blah. And then so if you use the 3 categories, you want to select 3 different main categories per one, because then when your show gets featured as a new and noteworthy, it's in 4. If it's up at the top, it's on the main section, and then it's also in the 3 subcategories that are the main ones. So if you do business investing, business careers, and business whatever, then you're like leaving money on the table essentially, or leaving attention on the table. So you should have your main categories differentiated by that. Does that make sense?
But would you then put a business show under health or something? I'm like, if it doesn't fit the category, how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, you just want to put the 3 that fit the most.
Just please don't put it under the podcasting
Podcasting?
category.
Yes.
Unless
anybody
you
agree
talk
with that?
about podcasting.
stay out of my category. Just
Get off
back
my
out.
lawn!
Get off my lawn. The young podcasters. No, seriously, we will hunt you down as a group,
Cool.
like a roundtable. There'll be a roundtable protest. Like I'm sorry.
That'll be great.
We
We could get
plan
so
on
many
it.
clicks.
That's actually our meetup at Podcast Movement.
Yeah, we will be recording an
Bring you into a
episode in
hotel
front of your
room.
house.
It's
That would
a
be
blanket
great.
party.
All right, Roundtabler's choice. Let's go with George, and we're reaching way back. I think that George and Ian maybe at the end of the 2013ers, but maybe we might be dipping into 2014. I don't recall, but. So George, you get to choose from some of this stuff. Now you listed you were on Twirt twice, so that's cool, right? And people what show is that? People don't recognize that.
The episode? Do you mean which
No,
episode?
just what's Twirt
it's
stand
called
for the non-geeks.
this week in radio tech.
And that is part of the Twit network.
It was part of the Twit network.
It was.
So I've been on
It's
it
gone.
once when it was part of Twit, and then once post Twit.
So then what was the main reason you appeared on those shows?
I think because the radio world is curious about the voiceover world. There's crossover. Of course, there's a lot of voice actors who came from radio. There's even voice actors who are currently in radio, still have a show, and can switch from being a radio host to a voice actor. And if you're not a voice actor, you don't understand how big a deal that is, but the two are completely different. And it's very hard to make the transition for many radio hosts. So I guess they thought it was just interesting, my point of view on. Actually, there was mostly geek stuff because it's a tech show. So they were asking about microphone choice and acoustics and trends and what people like to use and that kind of stuff. I think that's why they wanted me on.
Yeah, and so we have in this show we try to not do the how-to so much as again discussing the issues that producers face on a daily basis. You have just some general stuff here like audio video production, studio design, acoustics, engineering, technical consulting, workflow, anything geeky, which is good. You said you're a voiceover industry studio consultant.
Yeah.
And so anything in there, and then you list your tools, which you use Wirecast, and these are probably all changed by now, right?
The things that changed. So a year ago, last summer, we transitioned from doing more of a webcast style or a web chat style show where my co-host was in Buffalo and I'm in Santa Monica. So we were doing it all via Skype or Zoom, which is our favorite tool of choice now. And then casting it with Wirecast. Now my co-host has moved to LA. So we get to do the show in the same studio every week, physically in the same room, like a TV show. So now we do it more like a TV show. We've got a few little 1080p cameras.
I was going to say, so this is still video.
It's still a video show, but it's not 2 webcams with 2 guys disjointed from across the
Let's talk about that a
country.
little bit. Let's talk about a little bit about like audio versus video, and obviously audio being the lesser included. If you have a video podcast, it's easier to also have an audio podcast, though if you don't pay attention to the audio audience, specifically like in this show, we're live streaming, we're seeing each other in video, but if I don't describe something,
Yeah.
You know, like the fact that Ian's got an ATR 2100 as well, except his is plugged in XLR. Mine's USB. His is a yellow windscreen. You know, the audio, the people
Yeah.
miss out on that, right? So
Yeah.
what's the decision to go with video?
Well, when we started the show, first of all, I wanted it to be like Car Talks meets Twit, right? That was the idea. And it was going to be me and my co-host talking about the voiceover world. Really, we were going to be talking about voiceover studios, which, again, really small niche, but it was what we knew. We figured let's turn on the cameras and see people watch. But we decided to go video because at the time there was no really simple, easy tools for doing a live radio show on the internet like there is now, like Spreaker and Mixlr and stuff. That stuff didn't exist in 2010, at least that I didn't know. So the most logical choice was a video platform. So we did the original show was on Ustream, using Ustream Producer, the little app that's really based on Wirecast.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I was
in
like,
fact, you dug into the code and it was like Ustream. I mean, you could see like Wirecast and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I figured we're going to focus on the audio because to us, the audio is actually paramount. But instead of just having a static graphic on the screen, let's just turn on our cameras. I mean, we got it all here. We're going to do it live. Let's just do it.
But delivering that is not as easy as audio, right? Did you deliver that to a podcast feed, like an hour-long video?
No, so the show's a hybrid, kind of like this show. It's actually a lot more like what you're doing tonight than anything else. So the show is a video show that goes up on YouTube when it's done. But then I take the audio portion of that and put that up on Podbean. Why Podbean? I don't know. That's what we discovered to use 5-something years ago, and that's just we stuck with it. It works.
See, this is me peeling open another huge can of worms.
Yeah, well, I know. I listen to. I'm a fan of Podcasters Roundtable. I listen to you guys regularly.
Hosting's a great one. So, Ian, let me do a little crossover. Do you guys launch any video shows or just audio?
It's so funny. I have like a blog post that's like 90% written about how,
Nice.
like why not to use Podbean.
Not good. Hey, awesome. I think I have a draft of that in my, not necessarily Podbean, but just all of them.
Right. Because they're putting AdSense on content that people are coming for you. Like you might as well have a website and make money.
Do you put people on Stitcher?
Oh yeah.
They inject ads at Stitcher that you do not get any piece of or any access to. Or say
And they degrade the audio quality.
Yeah, that is
Quite a bit.
Which pisses me off.
It's another can of worms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so Podbean's worked for us. We don't. It's weird. I have to say, I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing what we do to everybody because it's a tremendous technical hurdle, and it's very difficult to give both genres all the attention they need. You know, it's very difficult to give the YouTube promotions and the video side of it and the live portion of it the promotion it needs while at the same time promoting the podcast. So in our world, we've actually the podcast is just kind of there, but the irony is the podcast is outviewed over the YouTube show. Like the one that we pay the least amount of attention to, we do the least amount of effort on. We don't do any special promotions in the podcast universe.
Easier to consume.
And it's easier to consume, and it's a long darn show. It's usually an hour and a half show. So how do I consume most video shows? Is by podcast. I listen to Bill Maher and 60 Minutes and all these TV shows now as podcasts because that's the way I can consume it, and many other people consume our show that way as well. So we do have to think of it as an audio show more than a video show at the end of the day. That's where the people are.
So are you saying you distribute the show as video both as a podcast and on YouTube?
That was what you were getting to. Yeah. No, it's the video world is strictly a YouTube product and it goes on YouTube.
Okay.
And the audio version is the true podcast, and it's an audio only podcast. That's
When
kind of
you-
how we do it.
When you say that you get more on YouTube, is that just raw views that you're seeing, or are you looking into your
No, he gets
audience
more in the
YouTube channel?
audio.
More
is better.
podcast plays.
More podcast plays than YouTube, which is typical.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard it the other
No,
way.
you heard it,
Sorry,
you heard
no.
it the right way.
Yeah.
the way that is most accurate that I find. Yeah, I think, the beauty of podcasting is that no one solution usually works for we do shows about how to podcast, and we give best practice advice, but you have to go and tweak and find out what works for your show, right? But again, Ian, do you guys launch any video shows?
No.
Okay, so
No
and
video.
is there a reason for that, or is just something you just don't work with
another
video?
It's audio's like 2D and video's 3D, right? It's like dealing with And for me, it's like to make really, really great video stuff takes a lot of work, and it's just we're just really good at audio, so we just focus on that.
Nice,
Makes sense.
specialized.
Stick with what you're good at. I mean,
Yeah.
that totally makes sense.
I love making movies. I have a YouTube channel that I love putting energy into, but it's more of an interesting side project. And if somebody wants to Dropbox me, 30 gigabytes worth of their video to cut
Yeah.
into something that's interesting, that's a different project. That's making a movie, and so
Yeah.
that's going to cost a lot,
If
right?
if only YouTube would let us put enclosures, their media into our enclosures, oh, the world would be so wonderful.
I will say this.
Free podcast
I'll
hosting.
interject this
Oh,
really
yeah.
quick. The engagement for us is from the video side.
Interesting.
Oh, that's cool.
That's where the engagement
And
is.
again, I think we're talking about an issue of ease, right? It's
Right.
easier to
Yeah.
engage on YouTube.
I think that it's super
Comment.
smart what you're doing, because that's what Joe Rogan's doing too. And Podbean doesn't really matter. It's just a silly little thing that we say, right? Like, because
Yeah.
you could. I mean, it does. It's the fact that it's easy for you is great. I mean, you're doing it. Most people never get to the process of ever doing things. Like, I want to start a podcast, so like,
Right.
I'd say jump on Podbean and record with your iPhone today if you want to start a podcast. Like, get it done. Because once you get a little bit of momentum, you learn how to do it. You frame the craft. Every time I'm talking to clients, it's like they're like, I want to launch a new show. I'm like, what you should do right now is start recording. You don't need to know the name of the show. Just have these interviews or talk about the thing that you're good at. And in 5 or 6 interviews, that what your show is going to become more clear to you as you do it. But if we sit here and try to think about what it is going to be, then it comes out like not as authentic.
Mm.
Dave, you like that or no? What do you think of it?
Absolutely. You find your voice somewhere around, episode 5 maybe. I always tell people you don't have to record, you don't have to release everything you record, and just going through the act of getting the words out of your mouth sometimes is harder than you think it is. Takes a little practice, and then you've got your notes, you've got your bullet points, if you're going to script stuff, going through the process of writing out what you're going to say will flesh out other ideas. So, yeah, I always tell people, record the first 3 episodes and throw them away, and then go back and record them again, or at least one, because people are always worried that, like, I've got to get this perfect. No, actually, you don't. You can actually, people are always worried about sounding stupid on a podcast. The only way you will sound stupid is if you record something stupid and then are stupid enough to publish it. Unless
And
it's
even
live.
like, has anybody listened to Joe Rogan's first episode?
No, should go back though, huh?
Check it out. It is the worst piece of crap ever. It's like the first 30 minutes is him and Brian Redband talking about how they can't get the video to work.
Has anybody listened to
It's
all
so
of our
funny.
first episodes? Yeah, first episodes are meant to be probably replaced.
Yeah.
I remember when Andrew Dice Clay came out with a podcast, and he kept treating it like radio, and he'd be like, "All right, you're listening to the Dice Man," and it's like every 10 minutes,
Every
and
10
it's
minutes he's
like people are
redoing
tuning in. It's like, dude, it's a podcast. You don't keep doing that.
Oh, people still do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love Dan Carlin, right? He just hits that boom and he's talking. It's so cool. Like, there's so much less post-production that really needs to be done.
And that's
And
tricky too,
A16Z, they do that too?
Yeah, talking about easy. I mean, this show, there are no bumpers. There is I mean, it's drag and drop, cut off the ends, and publish, right? And YouTube has got the video archive. So, and that's one of the reasons that this show stays afloat, is that it is quote unquote easy. Even that is not easy. Why? Because you have to show up every week, in our case, fortnightly, but you have to show up consistently. And after a year, that could get old. After 3 years, I mean, that's the hard part. It's staying. It's staying there. It's not starting. It's not even the content. I mean, if you're starting a show, you're probably starting it because you have something to say, or you want to find out something that you're looking into. So the hard part is just being there every week.
And I think that that's kind of the reason for this not focusing on new and noteworthy thing. And like, I think that that's really important. That's more important is the staying thing. A good launch is helpful, but it's just like a good way to start. Like,
Again, and that's best practice. Like, I am all for your best
Strategy.
launch possible.
Yeah.
But it's when people take it too far and they obsess over what did or did not happen in that launch, and they either get discouraged and stopped, or they have just the wrong perspective. I mean, like Dave, kind of I think indicated that, I only have 200 people listening. Well, podcasts are the long game. Like, you don't get it. It's not viral video, right? We're not looking for 2 million views on one YouTube video because we're going to get click ads or something. It's a different world.
Yeah, they're looking to quit their day job in 6 months, and it's like that's probably about 99% not going to happen.
99.99%.
Yeah. Not saying it couldn't, but it's just, realistic expectations might be need a bit of an adjustment there at times. Especially if you're, Bill Smith and not Bill Belichick or somebody with a name that people would recognize.
Yeah.
Right.
Bill
We always
Belichick.
launch
Here, I'm
people.
gonna let's actually record an episode of the Bill Belichick podcast right now. No.
Ooh.
Next question.
That's it.
No. Thanks. Tune in next week when you'll hear riveting.
Belichick.
See, it helps to be a sports geek sometimes.
You could do a fake podcast with just all the biggest names, right? And then just have somebody mimic them.
If
That'd be
they're
pretty
good,
funny. Like
if they're
a fake
funny, it could
podcast.
be funny.
You top all the
there are
search
fake
engines,
podcasts.
right?
We've had
Yeah.
fake podcasts on this podcast. I mean, they're
Oh,
literally
cool.
almost spoof of a podcast. So
That's like the most interesting thing about podcasting, right? Because it's just this brand new medium. Like there are no rules, right? There's 10-minute
Please.
podcasts that are amazing. The 10-minute podcast with Brian Callen, and then there's 5-hour podcasts with Dan Carlin, and you end up listening to it 3 times because it's so interesting, And so
Yeah.
when people say like, "Oh, how long should it be?" It's like you get to decide, and it's kind of scary for people. And the default is like you have a 30-minute show that's an interview thing, and you cut it down or whatever. But like, you can do whatever you want, right? Like Gimlet.
Uh-oh. Just me?
No.
He's
That's
muted on Hangouts.
Oh, it
Sorry.
blew.
Oh, there it goes.
You're back. You were saying like Gimlet.
Yeah, like the startup podcast, right? Like that is a completely different monster. It's a completely different thing than, the Joe Rogan experience, and both are super popular, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, and
It's so
Gimlet's not
tough.
really doing anything new. They're taking public radio and they're bringing it to to podcast. They're doing the hyper production, right? They're bringing that really high
Right.
quality production with a massive team that is funded to podcasting, and it's producing nice results. But I tell people all the time, please experiment. Do something that you didn't see on TV, or there's no one's going to pull the plug. No one says you're fired. No one comes in and says, no, let's press this button and do this. Please, I cannot wait to see the podcasts that are in our space 10, 15 years from now with kids who did not grow up with radio. They didn't grow up with TV. I mean, there'll be this transition, this fade from like YouTube style, right? That's what people watch these days. I watch more YouTube than TV these days. So it's a fun time, and the medium is wide open. No one's clamping down on it yet. Let's hope that it remains free and open. We could get a little bit more controversy about that. There was a recent New York Times article that was not so good. Dave, do you remember? And it's about sort of changing iTunes, saying that podcasters aren't getting what they need from iTunes.
They're saying we need to have Apple give us more stats, and we need to be able to have paid subscriptions and things like that, which sounds like a great idea. Apple at one point, I remember when they used to be about 80% of the market went through iTunes, which is great, and I love Apple, love their products. But on the other hand, some people will say the best thing that happened to podcasting was Apple, and the worst thing that happened to podcasting was Audio, which was later, the guy that started this little thing called Twitter. But Audio was a podcast directory, and when iTunes came along, they went, well, that's the end of that game, and everybody quit. Everybody that was working on what would have been competition for iTunes just left. And so they're the number one game in town. So if we give Apple more, like if we become more reliant on them, I don't know about you guys, but if you ever do anything with Apple, their percentage that they take of that money that you make, that you want to make through Apple, it hurts. It's like, wow, 30%? Really? Wow. Okay. Now, you can argue it's 30% to their 8 bazillion people, their users, which is a good thing. But it's one of those things where you got to maybe think about, is that really where we want to go? And I don't know that. The other thing that drives me nuts about all these stats, people go, you don't know how far they're listening to your show. And yes, you can get that on YouTube. I don't know why how have we had radio advertising for, since the 50s? Because nobody can tell me how long I listen to in a radio show.
It's also not true or accurate from what I know, right?
Yeah.
Daniel, you were going to say something.
Well, about the subscription thing, just for clarification, we're talking about selling subscriptions in iTunes, where like you can sell an audiobook or sell music, where you could go and potentially sell a podcast. I think of the ideas that these, quote, top, unquote, podcasters shared with the Apple iTunes team, I think that was the good one. The other ideas, really feel like these, quote, top, unquote, podcasters are just whining and completely oblivious to the tools that have been out there, and they're relying too much on Apple to give them free cookies.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, but that's how you're coming across if they're listening to this.
Dan Carlin's selling podcasts, right? You just go to his website and buy them, and you can buy
Yeah.
them on iTunes.
Yeah, it's super
Exactly.
simple.
It's already there.
It's not that hard. It's just they want this thing. They really want Apple to do everything for them.
Well, the best thing that you can read is Marco, and I don't know if Daniel, can you grab that link?
Yeah.
And he'll post it in the chat at podcastersroundtable.com/live. This is the best retort. And this is Marco Armet he does the Overcast podcast, and he nails it. And he really just talks about the dangers. Be careful what you wish for, right? Because podcasting is open and free, the way, what Ian was talking about. And you could be asking to take a lot of that freedom away. So check that out. We won't go any deeper, but back
And the
to
Overcast app is better for podcasting for everybody out there. Like, get the
I
Overcast
love it.
app. It's so much better.
There you go. And Marco, he kind of gets it, right? And it felt like this article was written by people who are writing an article, not so much as in the space. And maybe probably didn't, they always want to talk to the same three people in New York, right?
What three
Now-
people are they?
That Apple,
That's another good question. That's a problem. But
that
they're
Apple
inaccurate.
did reach out to these podcasters is really cool.
It's cool if
Yeah.
it's true, and it's cool if it's accurate. It appears to be.
And
But that's not new. From what I know, Apple's been pulling in podcasters for a long time. A lot of
John
invites.
Lee Dumas visited them several years ago because they chose him as like top of iTunes in some year or something. So
I've
they
met
invited
many
him to record.
podcasters had their own little meeting. So they it's Apple. They know what they're doing. We hope. But
Yeah, it's kind of like when people complain about search engine results, and it's like
Right.
Google's always making it. Why do we like Google so much? Because they craft the way that they serve their people. And so when people start complaining that they're not showing up in Google, it's like, well, maybe you're just not making good enough stuff,
Well, now here's a question that we're kind of dancing around. How do you feel about these top podcasters and these radio personalities, these celebrities now dominating the space? I know we talked about this a little bit in the last roundtable, but how do you feel about them kind of stealing all of the attention from the independent pirate radio hosts that really started podcasting?
No, that's a conversation that's right out of the voiceover world, because all these voice actors are PO'd at all the celebrities taking all the commercials and the animation.
And the question is,
Yeah.
who are they taking it, or is just who's responsible? It's the media that's focusing on it, right? It's the media that chooses who to feature, right? Or is it built in because these people are famous? Then they're tied into the promotion machine that is something like New York Times or someone that gets attention. This article got so much attention. It's sad that the people who have that sort of stage oftentimes don't get it right. But so what's the real issue, right?
I think there's kind of this threshold of celebrity status that, or in kind of any threshold of success, we could call it, that it seems like once you reach a particular threshold, it's really easy to expound or I can't remember the word, but compound your success on top of that. Because when you could launch anything, the Fluffy Bunny podcast, and people would be like, oh, this big celebrity just launched this new podcast. It's amazing. Let's put it on the front page of iTunes. It's the Fluffy Bunny podcast. And it could be horrible, but because you've got so much momentum and you've reached that threshold, then it's easy to seem like an overnight success. But it takes a ton of work to reach that threshold. And I think
I feel like the Tim Ferriss show is a good example of that, right? Like,
what, above the threshold or below it?
like once he got to that threshold, like when he launched his podcast, he was just like one, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't like the first episode. He was like drunk at the end of it, right? And so like,
Right, and that goes to the other topic of people who compare themselves against these number one shows and fail to realize that us, we didn't bring an audience to this platform, right? They brought a massive audience. Hey, I have a number one selling book that's been on the top of the charts for 4 years. I'm gonna start a podcast. You think it's pretty easy to get to the top of iTunes when you have an email list as big as Tim Ferriss when you start out?
I'll tell you this. I've had a client who was on The Biggest Loser and won the show and freaked everybody out because she lost like half of her body weight. And it was controversial. It was crazy. But she was telling me that her PR company was telling her to start a podcast, right? I mean, it was literally like part of like, all right, now that you're this person, now that you have a name, now that you've been in the paper, now you've trended on Twitter, now we want you to start a podcast. It was like mandated to her, like, you need to start a podcast now. This is what you do. It's really crazy.
I think that could be good news or bad news. I don't know.
It is. I think eventually, if we look back at like 2020, I think it'll be like having a fax machine in the 80s. Like after a while, everybody just had to have one. I hope podcasting doesn't go the way of the fax machine, but it does seem a way to get your brand out there and
yeah.
The
well,
people
I mean,
that want.
is it the new website? Everyone, you got to have a website, right?
Right.
I mean, now you got to have a podcast.
You got to have a podcast. Oh man,
That's good news.
well,
That's it.
Podcast
I hope
production
so.
companies.
no, it's true. It is good. It is good news. It's good news for all of us because we all benefit from that, right? In some way.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning we talked about, I mean, podcasting is not easy. It's going to weed out the bad content if it's just there because, hey, I'm here because I was told I need to be here. Well, good luck being there in 6 months because I didn't start it because I want to start it. Or some of those people, they'll start a podcast and be like, this is amazing. I have this amazing conduit to my audience and it's working for me. But people who start for the wrong reasons, obviously they're part of that. I don't make it, the 50% don't make it past episode 7 stat, right? So I like podcasting because it's hard and because it tends to, the good stuff does rise to the top. I mean, if you have really good stuff, people are going to share it by word of mouth. You can float that to the top in iTunes just by being good, right? And again, do you need to be at the top of iTunes? You don't. Will it help? Sure. But does it make your show successful? Absolutely not.
Right.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's like two kind of points that are important for me in this one because when we talk to clients, when I do sales calls and I talk to people who are doing new podcasts, a lot of the thing that qualifies them for using like having us produce with them is that they have an existing business, right? You guys, they've got like funnels, they've got products, they've got all this stuff, they've got an existing audience, and what they're trying to do is just have a new way of engaging with those people. And podcasting is such a great, authentic way to engage with a lot of people. That to me that's like a really important one. And so people who start a podcast and the idea that that's going to get them a lot of attention, that's like a poor decision. Like you should maybe run ads or something like that, right? If you want to get a bunch of audience quickly, just launching a podcast, unless it's excellent and people start talking about it, maybe like The Intern or Millennial, like Megan Tan made the Millennial podcast and it blew up because she did an excellent job, right? It's like Gimlet quality. And then, so that's really important, I think.
Yeah.
There was another point, but I can't remember what it was.
That's all right. We'll give you a chance to, you can, it'll be one of the, if we stop talking about it, then it'll come to you.
Oh, that's what it is.
Okay,
I got
go
it.
for
Sorry, you ready? Okay, so there's different podcasts for different reasons. Like Tim Ferriss launches his podcast and he wants like 1 million downloads a month, right? And if he gets 500,000, he feels like a failure. That's a specific type of podcast. But you could have like, the Denver, Colorado lawyer podcast where you talk to lawyers and maybe you get 200 or 300 listens from the lawyers in that area, but you become the expert lawyer and you're like know everybody in the neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you get 5 downloads. If it's like 5 of the top lawyers and one of them's the Supreme Court justice, then you've got a really big success there. And so different shows for different people and different goals for different.
You remind me of a really striking example a couple years ago. Jason Calacanis, big
the
startup guy. He had a network and it was doing so well in terms of monetization. He was really drawing in. This was years ago when big sponsors, big names weren't coming to sponsor podcasts. They were starting to come in, and then he cut it off. And even though he was probably at the top, because for him it wasn't hitting that mark, right? So he wanted 1 million downloads. He was getting 500,000. He was getting the sponsorships. It was for me, it sucked because it then said to the advertiser, I get why he did it, and most of us got why he stopped doing it. It wasn't for him, but to the advertisers just said, this doesn't work. It doesn't work here, and you got some more pullback. So it was a little step backwards, right? In terms of, the advertisers were like, oh, well, you need 1 million and this isn't going to work. I was like, no, he's actually, you don't realize you're new to this space where that audience, that's a massive, massive audience when it comes to podcasting because of how much a podcast can convert much better with a smaller number. But we are back to a time, where all brands are going to be rushing in, and it's just going to be a much tougher choice, I think, going back to that whole sponsorship and having a sponsor that is actually engaged with your brand, if you know how to do it right, as opposed to just, as opposed to me sitting here and being like, oh, you guys,
This podcast is
this
brought to you by
podcast,
Sierra
yeah, without
Nevada.
just product placement, whatever. By the Sierra Nevada, by the way, if you do, you call me up.
Yeah.
I did notice some crossover in the two things when you guys listed out, and both of you kind of hit on, I would say, more simple podcast setups. Or let's see, Ian, you said specifically, what did Ian say here? I got simple and lightweight podcasting, and George, you said where is it? I don't very. You said you do a lot with very little gear, which I don't believe. But maybe back then you do. It seems like you have a pretty big setup. So I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about podcasting in terms of gear setup. People love gear, but from that sort of point of view into sort of podcasting with less, right? And I talk about all the time where I've got this mic, ATR 2100 will travel because I think you could plug it in via USB, Audacity, and you're going to have, if anything, a great starting point, but you could go with that forever, right? So
Yeah.
I think that this puts some people off. Ian, you probably see this in your business, with you sort of having people send you stuff. They're recording it, not necessarily in your studio. This is perfect because Ian, people send you stuff. George, people come to your studio, right? I mean, I think you guys both have those experiences. So Ian, when it comes to setup, do people get intimidated by all the gear, and
Absolutely.
what do you set them up with to get a good quality?
Yeah, I have a page that's freedompodcasting.com/studio,
Yeah.
and it's just this Focusrite 2i2, the ATR 2100, and then Piezo, which is the easiest software for recording stuff. And like a lot of the people who podcast with us aren't good at this stuff. They hate it.
Yeah.
Like I actually talk to them on the phone. I'm like, okay, now plug this into there, and it's just setting up a Scarlett, right? It's like super easy, but it's easy for us, but it's not easy for everybody.
Right.
And so my whole thing is just don't think about the gear. This is what you get. It costs like maybe $300. It's very inexpensive. Plug it into your computer, and then just talk into the microphone. And then I have step-by-step tutorials, one like on my site, that are just really like baby steps showing my clients how to do it, because most of my clients openly admit that they like don't like tech and don't like to talk about it.
I do. I totally identify. I do exactly what you do for actors
Cool.
who are really reluctant to have to do this now.
But with voiceover, it's very important to get. It's got to be recorded right.
The quality has to be stellar. I mean, it has to sound like, even if they're in their tiny walk-in closet, you still better sound like you're in a studio.
So
a real
how do you
studio.
get that? How do you get that from people who really don't want to deal with it, and B, probably, I mean, we're not talking about budget, but unlimited with Luddites. How do you get that good audio?
Well, it's not all that different. I'm looking at Ian's page right now. It's cool, nice little page. I've been recommending the Scarlett for quite a long time. Now there's some newer ones that I'm a little bit more enamored with, so I've been recommending those. But the Scarlett 2i2 is a great piece. The microphone's the big difference. You can get a decent voiceover out of a 2100 with the right placement and everything, but I prefer microphones that are condenser style. Just to throw one brand out of just a model because it's on my desk. This is an AT875R. And you're probably looking at this and going, what? It's a video mic.
There's a bag with two of those on video cameras right behind me.
Yes, this is a on-camera video mic. It's a little shotgun. Not really shotgunny. It's not that directional.
Inexpensive too.
It just happens to sound really freaking good on a voice.
Yeah.
You stick it like right here, and it sounds really good.
There was a mic shootout by a dude who's got a really well done video, and that's the one he recommends, and it sounds really great. And people are like, "Well, shotgun microphone for podcasting, what?" But for voiceover, that is it's not uncommon.
Yeah, because we go for something a little different. For not that podcasters don't want to sound natural, but voice actors have to sound less colored, less radio, less DJ, and more natural. So they need to be a little further from the mic, and it generally needs to be a condenser because it needs to be more sensitive. This one gives you all that. It's portable. It's very lightweight. You can throw it in a bag, bash the heck out of it. It's not an expensive mic, about $180, which, okay, for some that might be like, whoa. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a great compromise. But the 2i2 has been supplanted for me now for the ultimate all-in-one thing that you can throw in your bag, or just your ultimate starter piece, has been supplanted by the Yamaha AG03. If you haven't seen this thing,
Daniel, is that mixer you just reviewed?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, you reviewed it too. I reviewed it. I've been promoting it. I know people that I'm not promoting it professionally, but I've been telling people to get it. And what's cool about it, in a nutshell, is it looks like a normal audio interface mixer. So to the layman, it's not that intimidating. Plug a mic in, done. However, if you get an engineer involved, he can go in there, or she, and go into this DSP window and set up EQ curve with 4-band parametric and compression and all this stuff. Create a preset that's actually locked inside the box. It's not dependent on the software at all. It's just a virtual remote. Program it, and it's done. It's locked into the chip inside, and they never have to screw with it. They can't mess it up. They can either turn it on or turn it off. And that is like the most awesome thing ever. I think it's really cool.
That's cool. So if you have an audio engineer friend or a post-production artist that can hook you up with a preset, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to plug myself, but I do this for people remotely all the time with a combination of like TeamViewer, remote access.
Yeah, right.
And then I use something called Source Connect now, which is kind of like a Google Hangout, but audio. It's really, really high bandwidth audio quality.
I've messed with it. I think I recall having issues with it. I was in touch with those guys for a long time.
Yeah, I know them really well that develop it. But
that's cool.
I can listen to their studio in about as good a quality as you can imagine and see their screen and control and set up their curves and all this crap in real time while they're reading a script as though I'm sitting there. It's just the technology has evolved. But at the same time, now that I can set it up for people remotely, they can actually make use of it.
Yeah.
Normally, they would just be like, forget it. I can't handle it,
Yeah. And as we increase people in, the number of podcasters, it does seem like the tech, it's gotten easier, right? I mean, people still complain podcasting's too hard. Again, I like that, but
it's getting easier, but the bar is raising in terms of what we want to achieve in terms of quality, right?
Yes. You're expected to, exactly. It's getting easier and cheaper, but what comes out the other end needs to be better, right? Which is probably the harder thing to accomplish.
Right. It's true.
It's interesting.
It's true. And acoustics are a big part of it. I mean, you don't have to have a great acoustical space for podcasting.
You got some DIY boards behind you?
Well, yeah, these are a little mixture of a couple companies worth of stuff. But they've sent me all these products, so I've just stacked them behind me because why not? They work great in here.
This is a great chance for me to get the audio audience over to YouTube, because if you're a hardcore geek, you want to see what is behind George. You do have to go to YouTube, check it out.
There's a bunch of stuff. There's stuff from ATS Acoustics, LASoundpanels.com, and then there's another thing over here which is hilarious. I'll show it to you real fast. It is a blanket. Oh, this monitor's in the way.
Big.
Nice.
It's a huge blanket that is made out of surplus military insulation that my friend discovered.
Sounds so cool.
He had them cut. He literally discovered these in a warehouse in Buffalo. Had them all cut into strips, and just sewed off the edges because they were like 30 feet long, and made them into like 5x8 sheets. And you hang this on your wall, like 2 of these in a room, and it's dead.
Nice.
It's really cool, but unfortunately you can't get them anymore because they ran out of stuff. But
wow.
It's just I love acoustics. That's my big thing. Gear is gear, and gear's fun. The acoustics is more of a black art, and that's kind of what I focus on. But for my world, that is really crucial. For podcasting, not as crucial.
Yeah, I gave a talk at Podcast Movement a couple years ago, and it was called like audio podcast post-production. I think I spent the first 20 minutes talking about the space you're recording in, and like that if you don't get it right when it goes into the microphone, is so much I can't do for you on the other side.
You can't fix it in post, or you can't fix it in the mix.
Yeah, it's so
wait
important.
Wait till like Audition has like this plugin that changes the room from being 10 by 12 echoey to
it's just like taking a raw photograph where it's like it's digital, it's all the info. I can just go in and do anything I want. You're like,
it's only a matter of time.
Yeah. So, stick with your show. Awesome. Well, I do have to get going, and we're about at the hour mark, so I like to let the live audience go, even though I hate cutting off podcasts when we're still having conversations. But live is a different animal. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm going to go around the room. If you have any last thoughts, feel free to share those, but definitely tell us where we can find your show, your podcast, and we'll head on out of here. Daniel, thanks so much once again.
Thank you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from the audacitytopodcast.com. I don't have any last thoughts, but just check out my podcast if you don't already.
Very cool. Yeah. And if you like this show, you'll like Daniel's show. So you know that. You've been here before. Dave, You've been here before. Thanks, buddy.
I have been here before. Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com, and talking about keeping things simple. I got a new iPhone on Mother's Day, and they threw in this really cool.
Why did you get a new iPhone on Mother's Day? I'm so confused.
I was bored, and
Oh, for yourself.
they threw in this really kick butt case. It's waterproof. You could like run over your. But it's more than I needed. So every time I want to put my headphones in, I have to unscrew it, and to get the bottom of this thing off, you have to. It's like it's so much more than I need. Where before I had a simple case, it worked. I don't generally throw my phone on the ground on a regular basis anyway.
I do.
So keeping it simple is always a good thing. So come visit me at schoolofpodcasting.com.
Dave can't pass up free swag. So send all your free swag to Dave. He'll use it. He'll actually use it.
And I'll throw it on the wall.
And George, thanks so much for joining us for your first roundtable. Thanks so much for being patient. Thanks so much for still staying in the space. And we finally got you on here, so that was cool.
My pleasure, man. I was totally like super excited. Like I had some things this afternoon, including a webinar, and I even managed to reschedule that so I could be here because I was really psyched. But so cool. You basically my world. I work for a company and I do a show, and they're not related, but everything is at georgewhittam.com. So just georgewhittam.com, WHITTAM.com.
What's the T-shirt? It's I see podcast.
Oh, it's so cheesy.
Yeah, it was podcast celebrity.
I got it at NAB. I was in their store walking around the NAB store.
Wait, NAB had something in the store about podcasting? There's so much of that sentence doesn't make sense to me.
I kid you not.
I
had to get it. It was so corny.
That is hilarious. Does it say NAB on it?
No.
Oh,
no, it's just they just found this design and they just said, let's put it in our store.
That it actually kind of fits the way NAB looks at podcasting with a cheesy T-shirt.
Exactly.
Good job,
and one last gear thing. One More is the most obscure brand you'll ever hear of. One More. This is actually the brand. One More. They make this triple driver in-ear monitor. And if you like in-ear monitors, $100 gets you the best sounding in-ear monitors I've ever seen this side of $3,000 in-ear monitors, which exist, by the way. So if you want to check out, I'm just been telling everybody because these freaking things are amazing. USA.onemore.com. I don't get anything for that. They're awesome.
I bought some recently for the roundtable. You see what I got going, and it was to get these out of the way. I don't like having headphones on, but all I could hear was the inside of my head because they isolated the sound so well that they didn't work for the roundtable. So what do I use them now? I use them for the airplane because they block out the sound. So but
love them.
I can't help. I'm a gear junkie, so of course I'll take a look.
Headphone junkie. I got 10 headphones within arm's reach. I'm a junkie.
Nice. There's a whole podcast to be started right there.
Yes, it is.
Ian, thanks so much again also for being patient. And, you did what I think you may have heard me ask was I said, hey, if you've been on the list or if you hear something or just reach out. If you want to be on the show, remind me. There's a lot of people. And so it does help to be in the chat, to stay in touch. Snapchat me, podcaster. I don't care, but a podcast helper. But thanks for joining us, Ian.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you guys, and you guys are so knowledgeable. I feel like I learned a lot from this. So
awesome.
Thank you very much for inviting me and setting it up. Daniel, I hope I didn't come off like a dick with that post. And, I'm gonna go check out that mic now because I want that travel one. So I've got a lot out of this. So I really appreciate it. And,
awesome, and where should we go to check out your content?
freedompodcasting.com.
Perfect. All right, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks again. That's another roundtable. We'll come back for Podcaster Roundtable 72 in 2 weeks. And that's it. I said that already. Wave goodbye. I'm just not doing well. I'm not a good host today. I just can't get out of this one. I gotta go. Cut it. Stop broadcasting.
Great talking to you guys. I really appreciate it.